people have asked how Camp Fowler has started. Well, back in the 50s, a lot of churches were taking their kids for week-long camping trips, and that was the same thing was happening in the Reformed Church out in the Albany Synod, and the different classes or clusters of churches would take kids to different places. I know Burden Lake was one of the places that was listed where they went, and they would spend a week at these camps, and the churches would provide the pastors and all the volunteers, and the nurses would all go, and they would do their own programming. And one year they got 2 weeks to do this at one of the camps, and they were ecstatic that they could have kids for 2 weeks going to camp. But the next year they could only go for 1 week, and that upset people. There were some folks who decided that maybe we should get a camp of our own. Maybe the Reformed Church should have a camp of its own. And some pastors from the Palatine region, Fort Plain and Canajoharie and St. Johnsville and those areas down in the Mohawk, began searching for places. And they looked for a number of different places. But it so happened that one of the women, who was a nurse on one of the weeks where they had taken kids camping, was staying over at Moffett Beach behind me. And she was paddling her canoe past the shores of where Camp Fowler is now, and saw a for sale sign. And it had been owned by the Olmsted family out of Northville. And they inquired about how much it would cost to buy it, and it was going to be $25,000 to buy 1,000 feet of lake frontage, 165 acres, and 9 buildings, 5 of which were old Great Camp buildings, part of the Anthony B. Farrell Great Camp. And so 4 of those pastors, and I don't remember their names because I'm on the lake, but Chet Chilton and Ernie Crounce and Jim Venus, I think were 3 of them. I don't think Herm Lubin was part of that, though he was involved in this whole effort. Came up on a cold winter day, and they snowshoed over from Moffett Beach because there was no road coming in to what we would call Camp Fowler now. And I think of them as the 4 snowshoers of the apocalypse. They came snowshoeing through the woods, and they got to the buildings, and they thought this would make a wonderful children's camp. And so one of them had remembered that Louis Fowler had died a few years previous. He was from St. Johnsville, grew up in Pasico, and he owned Palatine Dye, a company out of St. Johnsville. And there was $30,000 that were part of a gift from his fellow workers when he died, and it was to be used for the children of St. Johnsville. And they approached Mrs. Fowler, and they asked if she could get some of that money freed up to purchase the property from the Olmsteds. And so she talked to the businessman, and yep, they were able to free up $25,000 of that. And the rest was used for a trust, which is still there, to allow kids from St. Johnsville to come to camp and to pay for their time at camp. But they raised up the $25,000, and they bought the property from the Olmsteds back in 1953. They had to put up a dining hall, Suits Hall. It was our first dining hall, and they got it done like a day before camp was to open on July 11th, 1954. And they were able to start Camp Fowler on this beautiful lake. And some people thought they were crazy for being so far away. But for 66 years now, if you can count this summer, we've had children coming up, being blessed by being on this lake, being in these woods, hearing the birds, and hearing the Word of God spoken and lived during their time at Fowler. So that's a little bit of the history of the beginning of camp.